Now, the drug abuse problem in Africa cuts across societal classes, as United Nations Drug Agency estimates there were more than 34 million cannabis users and 1.8 million cocaine users in West and in Central Africa in 2016. Imagine what it will be in 2023. Now, unlike expensive narcotics, opioids are more easily accessible as they mostly cost less than $5. And many young people across the continent are also turning to a range of unconventional concoction, which includes smoking lizard dung and sniffing urine, petrol, and fermented sewage for a cheap high. You won't believe it, but it's true. Now, crucially, the UN agency also estimates that only 1 in 18 drug users with addiction issues has access to appropriate medical treatment. With that being said, I have the honor of introducing the founder, Drug-Free Clubs and Drug-Free Advocate, Recovery Support Counsellor, Lagos, Nigeria. And I'm talking about Ifeoluwayimika Bamidele. Thank you so much for joining me, Ifeoluwa. Please, could you unmute your device? I mean, I can see your beautiful smile, but I can't hear what you're saying.
Thank you very much, Blessings. It's a privilege to be here and to be on the conversation.
Oh, it's a privilege to have you. Thank you for joining us. Also, we have joining me Michelle Mulingo, Yellow World Communications Officer in Zimbabwe. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us.
Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very fine.
All right. Okay, so I have Ifeoluwayimika and of course I have Michelle. So we will be delving into the topic of drug and substance abuse, which is a very, very critical issue that should be talked about in this age and time. And I'm going to be starting with Ifeoluwa. The question that begs for answer is, why are so many youths involved in substance abuse?
Question is like one of the biggest questions that we've had to answer every time that we speak about drug abuse. And the truth is that this is a multifaceted question that has multi-pronged approach to answering it. Young people are challenged. It's an epidemic, and it has found its way into the fabric of society, meaning that it's already part of us. The same way we had COVID with us, that's the same way we're having drug abuse, but we're not talking about addiction yet because people are quiet or silent about it. So why do we have addiction? Addiction, drug use, which leads abuse, which leads to addiction, is a product of the fad, meaning that it is more socially acceptable for people to use than not use. Some years ago, it was easier for people to stay away from, and it was the people who were using who were the problem. But now it is you who is not using that is the problem. So there's a social factor, meaning that people find it more comfortable to use, people find it socially acceptable to use, and it is being promoted. It's the easier option, or it's the easier thing to do. And so that's one of the factors. There's also the ease of access, meaning that people are finding drugs more available than before. So you mentioned concoctions as well, which makes it easy for people to have some form of substance to be using or to be able to. And then there's also people who talk about the social state or the place of the mind and the body as well, which the mental health of people and the state they're in, and trying to find solutions to their mental health challenges or to their social challenges. So we have multiple reasons why people use drugs, but these are some of the reasons. And I must tell you, when you look into all of these factors, they can be broken down into smaller bits with all of the reasons that people can mention. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that, Ifeoluwa. I mean, that was not so extensive, but very, very comprehensive. And also, I'm going to ask Michelle, do you agree that this is the major reason or one of the many reasons that people are involved in substance abuse? And why do we think that people, let's even say it's about the influence now, why do we think that people get so gullible and get to use? I mean, you hear so many people say things like it helps you relieve stress and all of that. What do you have to say about that?
Okay, in Zimbabwe, like, as you know, the economy is not favorable, but you find people using these drugs and you wonder where they're getting the money, because they're saying it's hard to live, the economy is not good, but people are coming up with various ways and various substances and drugs that they're creating from the food that we actually buy as groceries. And these drug abusers, most of them, it's no longer the youth only. Even from the kindergarten school, you find them experimenting with a lot of things. So the reasons behind why there's high drug addiction is actually something that I think we really need to look into, because there is no clear answer as to why people are now addicts to drugs.
All right, thank you so much for that, Michelle. I mean, you both have done justice to that particular question. Now, we will be back to talk about this and to continue the conversation. But first of all, since this is a youth-inclined topic and a topic for the youth, we'd like to go to the streets of Africa to hear what the youths have to say about drug use and drug addiction. Do take a look.
What I can say about it is it causes most of the youth to misbehave.
What causes drug addiction mostly is peer pressure, and we get to see people joining their friends because their friends are into those drugs. You see most of them also doing the same thing, and I think how we can stop it is to first of all try to speak out. So if you see someone doing drugs, you just let the person know that this is not good. So you try to let the person see the side effects or what it could cause them in the future. So some people might not see that, but if you speak out and tell them, most people would stop. So most people don't see people to tell them. That's why they don't stop. So I think some of the effects are some people end up going crazy.
Drug addiction is when some people or persons are unable to stop taking a particular substance, for instance, alcohol, and prescribed drugs. These people then take these things and they are unable to stop. What are the causes of these things? We have peer pressure, we have depression. These things make people go to the extreme of taking these drugs that might help them relieve their pain or make them even feel good, and they are then unable to stop taking these drugs. How can we stop this damage people do to themselves? By sensitizing and educating people on the harmful effects of these addictions and what it can do to them. You know, how it damages their liver and their body parts and also kills them and spoils their life.
It is very, very bad because just like every addiction, drug addiction is definitely not good. It affects the behavior, it affects the brain. And when we talk about drug addiction, we don't only talk about the addiction of marijuana and every other illegal drugs. You can actually abuse prescribed drugs like postinol, like codeine. That is why you see most of these pharmacies, they don't stock up or they sell these drugs only when you bring or provide a doctor's prescription. Even with doctor's prescription, like there's like a low flow of these drugs because they know that mostly youths, they abuse this drug. Like talking about codeine in particular, you see people taking excessive bottles of codeine just to prevent them from sleeping, keeping them all through the night. One way to eradicate this is creating a drug orientation awareness, telling these youths the harmful part of abusing drugs.
Well, there you have it. Those were the opinions of the youth as regard drug abuse and addiction. Now, I still have with me my guests, Michelle and, of course, Ifeoluwayimika. And we're still going to continue this conversation. Now, we heard what most of the youth said about drug abuse, how it is, just like Ifeoluwa said, the social impact is also comes to play when it comes to drug addiction, and a lot of other factors are involved. So Ifeoluwa, is it okay to say that there won't be much number of youths involved in substance abuse if there was enough awareness? Because I think the first or the second youth who spoke said something about people not knowing that they're not supposed to. So if they knew better, they would do better. I mean, some people will argue that because we all have moral compasses, right? Everybody should know what is wrong and what isn't. But then again, for the purpose of learning and getting better understanding on this, is it okay to say that there won't be that much number of youths doing drugs or being addicted to drugs if they knew better, if they were more open to the risks associated with it, so if there was more awareness, basically?
There's two ways to look at this. One of the ways to look at it is to say, what if people knew? Maybe they will make new decisions. Maybe they will be more willing to stop. But we're at a point where people are already in it. So if you know that you are going somewhere, right? And you know that that place may be dangerous, you can make a wise decision. However, if you are already there and that place is dangerous, then you now need to get out of there and prevent yourself from going there again. That's one group. Then there's another group that needs to know, and then more importantly, they need to know the dangers. Apart from the dangers, they also need to know how to get help if peradventure they get in. So we need to have continuous conversations. So there's a lot of information about drug abuse. However, when people already get in, they are avoiding the discussion about support, rehabilitation support, post-recovery support, and when the situation already happens. The problem is we don't want it to happen to us. Everybody says, oh no, I don't want anything about addiction. I don't want my sister, my brother, my son, my daughter. I don't think that this should ever happen to me. But it's already happening. So now the question is, how do we go from there? And for those who are not already in, how do we move up to ensure that you don't do it? So we always use a two-pronged approach with the drug-free clubs and the drug-free advocacy. We do that of demand reduction and supply reduction for the institutions. So you tell people who have not yet used drugs to advocate against drug abuse, to have refusal skills, to build their own capacities. And for people who are already there, how do they get out of it? How can they get support? How can they get treatment? After treatment, how do they get post-treatment support, and then family or integration or societal integration for how to get support for them? So yes, we need to say more, but there is already a problem. And it is not at the time when the problem is already existing that we're going to focus now should be on how to get more people out of it. The numbers are alarmingly high. You gave us the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime Statistics, and the numbers are increasing by the day. So if the numbers are increasing, we need to first bring people out of addiction already, and then ensure that more people are not going into it. So that's the current reality.
All right, thank you so much for that, Ifeoluwayimika. I mean, that was, properly dissected. So thank you once again. Now, Michelle, let's look at this from the three levels, right? We're talking about the government level, and then coming down to societal level, and of course, family. And the question is, what are we missing? What are we not doing right? Why is it that someone who was trained in a God-fearing home, like they would always say, will find him or herself doing drugs and not even being able to stop to the point where it gets to addiction? So what are we missing on all three levels?
Okay, from my experience, I think most people here in Zimbabwe, they are very educated, one, and most of the youths are very idle. They're not doing anything. And they are now channeling those few things that they later school in creating these drugs and substances from the backyards. And nothing is being done about it. And even if you look at the government, the laws that are there on someone who's doing drugs or who's selling drugs, they are very, very not hard, because you get to pay some.
Michelle, are you there? All right. I think we lost Michelle's audio. We're hoping that we can get her. Michelle, can you hear me? All right, while we wait for Michelle, can I just direct the question back to Ifeoluwayimika?
Yes, for governments, for example, in Nigeria, the role of the government has an agency which is doing its very best. The NDLEA, the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, which has two responsibilities. One of its responsibility is to ensure that it cuts the supply of drugs, and then it also helps with drug demand rehabilitation. With drug supply, it goes to airports, farms, to ensure that drugs don't get to the people. And then with those who are already in recovery or those who want to change, it sets up centers for rehabilitation, phone lines for people to be able to call in. And that's what the role of government. Is it enough? No. And my recommendation is that private organizations, educational institutions, individuals should get involved. The last time I had a discussion with the head of the Nigerian Drug Law Enforcement Agency, Brigadier General Buba Marwa, he spoke to me about an institution that was being set up in one of the states in southwest Nigeria that was a private rehabilitation center by concerned citizens. So individuals need to get involved, corporate organizations need to get involved, groups and governments need to get involved. Like you mentioned, the government has a duty to play and the buck stops on their table. As long as the drugs get to our houses, to our children, to our brothers, then the drugs will continue to circulate. And it's also important to note that for many people, the drug abuse or drug addiction issue is a business. So the dealer is in it for business. And so you are trying to protect your friend, your family member, your cousin, your neighbor. But the person who is selling wants to make money. And for as long as they can make profit off them, they are not making new decisions. So you mentioned the government. Yes, you mentioned the family. And what was the third thing?
The society.
So I'll go to the family next. One of the problems what we have with the family is that family usually, in many cases that I have experienced, I've spoken to over 1,000 persons who use drugs and are trying to stop in the last 10 years. The family comes up with denial. So it means that I meet many mothers, family members, uncles, fathers, and then for the first time they hear that their children have been abusing one substance or the other, and then they go off grid. Like, somebody collapses. You call him and say, oh, there's something that I would like to talk to you about. Your child has asked me to speak to you about something that they've been contemplating or not being able to speak to you about, and then they want us to have this discussion. And if it was in a situation where you couldn't have support, you might have an emergency on your hands. So many families are in denial, and when the families also come to terms with it, they don't know where to go to. So I find many people sending messages, phone calls after programs like this. They say, so now I have a son, now I have a daughter, now I have a nephew, now I have a niece. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to help the person. Friends, family members, schoolmates, colleagues at work, they know that there's this colleague who always comes to work stoned. I don't know what to do. So for family members, the important thing for family members to be able to do is to do all they can to get help. So speak to medical practitioners, speak to counseling psychologists, speak to somebody who is able to give help. Don't just keep quiet. Don't hide it. Don't pretend that if it does not exist. Address it headlong, because it's a situation that can change your family. Your family can be different for it. Some years ago, I met a 50-year-old woman whose only child, in celebrating that he had completed his university education, decided to overdose with his friend. He promised himself that he was going to stop using drugs immediately after graduating from uni. But unfortunately, this 50-year-old woman was called to come and pick the body of her son. He was dead. He didn't live to finally graduate. So the family has a responsibility. Look after your children. Don't be forceful, but listen. Some years ago, I think it was 2 years ago, the United Nations Office on Drug and Crimes, on the day of the World Drug Day, the team was listen first. Many parents, many family members are not listening. And after listening, seek for help. And for society, in Africa, we have a lot of communalism. We have a lot of community support, where like many people now see things and then we take a high of it. But as a community, we must continue to speak up. We must continue to lend a hand. We must continue to give support. You see a behavioral pattern that you are not comfortable with the child of your brother, the child of your neighbor, and then you can chip in a word. You don't have to condemn, you don't have to judge, but the aim of helping or the aim of the community is supposed to be help. And like I just mentioned with the example of building a rehabilitation center, if the people know that you are there to help, if the people know that you want to give support, many young people want help. They're in a situation where they want help. We have attention and advice sessions, for example, that we host for young people who use drugs and are trying to stop, where they speak about their experience. And one of the greatest things that they talk about is how they are unable to speak about these same experiences in any other place because people are going to judge them. How do I tell my father that I've been using some form of substance for the last 10 years? How do I tell him that from my first year in secondary school, I've been addicted to a particular drug or the other? So it is very difficult. People want to maintain their social standing. And so in view of that, our families are not talking, the society is quiet, and until the damage comes at our doorstep, that is when there's not much we can do. So there's so much more that governments can do, that families can do, and the society can do. But together and collaboratively, we can stem this pandemic, and then we can end drug addiction. It is something that is attacking us and affecting us as a nation, but I verily believe, and as a continent, but I verily believe that with our hands joined together, we can do something great about it.
Wow, I should call you Professor Ifeoluwayimika. Thank you so much for that. I mean, that was extensively, very, very comprehensive. Thank you. Michelle was saying something before we lost her connection. Michelle, we have you back now. Can you please go ahead? Michelle, can you hear me? I think that her network seems to be fluctuating, but we'll definitely get back to her. And, well, shortly, I'll just go back to our professor, Ifeoluwayimika. Now, this is a very quick question because of our time. Looking at the statistics of people who have access to medical care, I mean, you have carefully dissected it, looking at, the government level, the family level, and of course, societal level. Now, looking at the statistics of those who have the access to medical care, how dangerous is this and how worse can it get in the future if people keep, due to societal pressure and all of that, keep going into drugs and getting addicted to it? What are the dangers for the youth of Africa?
I think we have our back, and that's lucky for us. Hopefully she can hear us. But the dangers for the youth of Africa are unlimited. Where, like I mentioned, I compared this to COVID. A pandemic or an endemic situation. We're in a real situation, and we must address it headlong. So because people don't have access to medical care or support, either because of access or affordability, we must continue to increase or improve access, meaning that more medical facilities must begin to consider mental health, drug abuse, and drug rehabilitation. And apart from access, we must also consider affordability. So whilst individuals, governments, private establishments, government institutions are looking at providing the access, medical care, post-rehabilitation treatment, they must also consider the affordability. So I know that there are establishments, organizations, institutions that are concerned about the cost and how to ensure that we reduce costs. So those two areas are two important dimensions for this.
All right, thank you so much, Ifeoluwayimika. Quickly, Michelle, can you please say something about that, the statistics of those who have access to medical care and how dangerous it is? And also, I would like for us to look at, juxtapose between rehabilitation and relapse. How effective is rehabilitation in this part of the world? Do we say that it actually holds water, or do a lot of people, go back into drugs even after being rehabilitated? Please say something about that really quickly.
Okay, in Zimbabwe, we have only, like in Bulawayo, we have only one rehabilitation center, and that's in Gucheni, the Khumalo Hut. It can only accommodate something like 183, but at the moment, it's very full, and it doesn't take a lot of people. The people that go there, they don't get enough rehabilitation because the numbers of people abusing drugs is very high in Zimbabwe, and especially in Bulawayo. So it becomes a problem because one cannot be fully rehabilitated. They are only rehabilitated maybe for a month, 2 months, and if they go back to the society, it becomes easy for them to relapse. So as a Yellow World, we have come up with a solution, close to a solution, like where we are advocating for safer spaces in the communities, where we have mental health facilities and trained mental health experts who come through and help youths in those particular communities where we have our projects, so that we try by all means to try and bridge the gap between access to these rehabilitation centers, and also come to think of it that rehabilitation centers that are there, they are very expensive and most youths cannot afford them. So we are trying to make these centers community centers that are affordable and readily available for the youths in the communities.
All right, thank you so much. I would like to say a big thank you to my guest, the founder, Drug Free Clubs and Drug Free Advocates, Recovery Support Counselor in Lagos, Nigeria. I call him Professor. I mean, you know why, if you've been following the show.
Yeah, I'm actually an assistant professor.
Oh, you see?
And I'm in medical law as well.
You see that now? All right, thank you so much, Ifeoluwayimika Bamidele. Looking forward to have you again on this show. Thank you once again for joining us. And also, I want to say a big thank you to Yellow World Communications Officer Zimbabwe, Michelle Mulingo. I'm so sorry that the connection wasn't as smooth, but we're still able to get your feedback and your opinions on this matter. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.